Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Dwight Kay was recently elected to a second term in the Illinois House of Representatives, District 112. Earlier in 2012, he said there is unfinished business he wished to continue working on. Lowering taxes and increasing job growth are the top priorities. Repealing the 67% state income tax hike, workers' compensation reform, and legal reform of the civil courts are also very important. Today we're going to discuss the outcome of the Illinois general election and what that means for passage of Mr. Kay's priorities. Dwight Kay, welcome to Conversation.
Thank you for having me back.
Well, let's briefly just go over what was at the state level, what were the results of the Illinois general election on November 6th of 2012?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the Democrats pretty much had their way in the state of Illinois. We have supermajorities both in the Senate and the House, and of course most people know that the Democrats hold the governorship. So we have a pretty much one-party rule for the next 2 years.
Now, when you say the word supermajority, what does that mean?
Well, that means that within the House and the Senate, without any Republican votes, anything can be passed, and any veto can be overridden. Governor's signature on a bill can be overridden by the supermajorities in both in the Democratic Party.
Okay, and as a Republican, do you get any committee assignments?
Oh, sure. The committee assignments will be somewhat. We will have a lesser number on the committees, and because there's more Democrats, we'll see more Democrats on the committee. So that's standard practice and to be expected.
Mm-hmm. And I know before this election, Republicans had little to say in the committees and they just never did, because of their small numbers, the ability to make law in the state of Illinois. When I was in the introduction and I was talking about the reducing taxes, the workers' compensation program, and the others that I mentioned, is there any chance that this new majority will even think about fixing some of those issues?
Well, I'm not much of a prognosticator, but let's just stop here and back up a minute. The very same problems we had in the state of Illinois 2 years ago, election time, are the same problems we have today, but they're bigger. We need to reduce the 67% tax increase, or we're going to continue to see businesses fleeing, and we're not going to have businesses looking at Illinois as being a state that they want to come to.
How do you know that that's true? I mean, yes, it's said that a tax increase will cause businesses to leave and others not to come, and that's said, but how do we know that that's true? How do you know that that's true?
Well, we know one thing for sure. We know that businesses have left. We have not grown in numbers. We also know that our neighboring states, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, and Indiana, and particularly Indiana, all have seen Illinois companies go their direction. Mm-hmm. So that's a fact. You can check it out with Department of Economic Development within Illinois. They will give you those numbers. And we also know that unemployment in Illinois has not improved any. We're not creating jobs, we're not putting people back to work, and that has a lot to do with the fact that we're not a job-creating state. People are really retrenching. The businesses that are here, they're not looking at creating jobs. If anything, they're looking at holding where they are right now to see what the General Assembly is going to do.
Now, you represent the Edwardsville, Glen Carbon, Collinsville, Maryville area, which in the last number of years has generally had great economic increases. Is that continuing or not continuing?
I think it's flat. If you look at the labor statistics for Illinois, the Metro East has remained flat and maybe shown a slight increase in employing people. Our unemployment rate may be a little bit lower than the balance of the state, but we need to be looking at the entire state. You know, the Metro East could prosper and the state still not do well, and that would be bad for the state. So we need to look at the entire state. But on the whole, I think because of our location and because of some other opportunities having to do with universities and you know, the transportation system, we seem to be somewhat more attractive than other parts of the state.
Now, Chicago is actually the engine of the state of Illinois, isn't it?
No doubt about it.
That's where most incomes are derived from. What's going on in Chicago economically?
Well, Chicago is, I think, doing okay in terms of the revenues that are coming in because of the taxes that have been imposed, but they also account for the large majority of the unemployment we see. When you look at Illinois, the city of Chicago, Cook County, and the collar counties are the center of where our population exists. So as Chicago goes and the collar counties go, so Illinois goes. And I'd say our rate of unemployment being unacceptable does not bode well for the numbers that Chicago is turning out in terms of really creating more high-paying jobs.
So coming back to my earlier question of, do you think that the things that you consider priorities for legislative action will have action on them?
Well, let me answer, and I don't mean to dodge your question, let me answer it in reverse, if I may. If we don't start listening to business and the individual taxpayers, we're going to lose both. I have not asked for anything unfair with respect to workers' compensation reform. We've just simply said, let's make it a fair system, let's make it real compensation and not a benefit, and let's redefine the legal cause of action, which means the workplace must be the fundamental place where an injury occurs. That's not the case today. Secondly, let's get back.
Okay, let's fill that out. So if it's not the workplace, where can people be injured and still be paid under workers' compensation?
Well, I may have said this to you when we met the last time, but it's not uncommon, both for state workers or those people who are working for companies in Illinois, to have an injury that happens outside of the workplace. And they come to the workplace and they work for a short period of time, or maybe they work a day or two, and they exacerbate that injury that happened off the job. That's compensable in Illinois. In the states around us, that's not compensable. So you have to ask yourself, are we now competitive with those states in creating jobs and keeping businesses? And I think the answer would be a resounding no.
And who pays these folks who are claiming workers' compensation?
Well, certainly on the state side, for state workers, as we saw down at Menard Correctional and Pinckneyville and other places, the taxpayers pay the bill. Flip side is, in the private sector, the job creators, the people who are bringing those people in every day and paying their health, welfare, and pension and paying their salaries, the companies pay those bills.
Okay. So moving on to some of the other priorities that you named, what do you think will happen on some of these other issues, like reform of the courts, the civil courts?
Well, if you look, and I didn't do a lot of research, but I did look at the judicial elections throughout the state, people seem to be very happy with our system. And yet we rank, statistically, we rank down at the very, very bottom of the state list when it comes to judicial fairness. And I don't think anyone is going to say that we get high marks for our court system. As a matter of fact, when it comes to the term legal abuse, we rank real high on the charts. And Cook County and other counties in the state, there's 4 counties in the state that do not get high marks, Cook County being at the top, certainly don't put us in a position where, again, we're screaming that we're a competitive state for those businesses that would like to stay or come here.
For those people who voted for you they obviously agree with the things that you say and your priorities. And they're probably disappointed to hear you say that there's very little chance that you're going to have an opportunity to work on stuff like that. What do you say to people, your friends and neighbors, whether they voted for you or not, about the situation in Illinois and what they can do to improve it?
Well, let me back up. I didn't say I wasn't going to do anything about it. I'm going to continue to press my agenda.
Yes.
I think I've mentioned before in your program, I enjoy a very good relationship with Speaker Madigan, and I enjoy a good relationship with my colleagues across the aisle.
Okay.
That bodes very well.
All right.
So I'm going to continue to press my agenda, but maybe the better question is, what will leadership in Springfield do, as an example, with pensions? With another example, property tax. We need to freeze property taxes for 3 years. We need to start it right now.
Why?
Well, we're going to put homeowners at risk. We had 3, maybe 4 years of a known downturn in the housing market. That downturn basically put a $200,000 home at a value somewhere around $160,000, maybe $65,000. And yet today, as we speak, those people are looking at either the same tax bills, or in some cases a little bit more, or in some cases just slightly less. Mm-hmm. So we need to protect these people who are really paying bills for schools and roads and teachers, universities. What people don't understand, Lee, is that just about $25 billion that goes into the state revenues every year comes from property tax owners. What happens if they lose the ability to pay their property taxes? That's my question. So we need to protect them. We don't need to show them a privilege, but we have awfully high taxes in this area, and we need to make sure that people can continue to pay them. And my proposal is we freeze it for 3 years, and it's not going to hurt anybody. My estimate says, school districts might have to reduce their spending 2.5% to 3%, but nobody has said that's outrageous, that's draconian. So, good reason to protect it.
No, of course, tax rates are set in the county. They're not set by the state, are they?
No.
So what is it that the state legislature, what are you suggesting the state legislature can do about property tax reform?
Well, we do have the ability to pass legislation that tells the counties to freeze tax increases. Now, of course, let me make it really clear. If indeed somebody were to make an improvement to their home, then they wouldn't be subject to a freeze. They'd be subject to a reappraisal.
Right.
So I want to make that clear.
Yes.
But we do have the power to pass legislation which would freeze or cap it for a 3-year period of time.
What do superintendents of schools and school boards think of freezing property taxes, especially as they face ever-increasing insistence by teacher unions, by janitorial unions, et cetera, that they need to be paid more?
Well, let's compare what happened in the private sector and the public sector in the last 3 to 4 years. In the private sector, prudent business people said there will be no raises, there will be no increase in what I just refer to as health, welfare, and pension, because we want to keep the doors open. The public sector looks at it differently. They see taxpayer money and they see the ability to impose levies, to increase that taxpayer money. So their, if you will, their reduction in spending has not happened. In most cases, there's been some, but not probably enough, because they continue to rely on you and me to foot the bill. Mm-hmm. So what we need to be thinking about is to bring the concepts of the private sector and keeping the doors open to the public sector, so that we don't have an undue burden placed on taxpayers to keep the door open.
Mm-hmm. In your conversations with the people, the decision makers in the public sector, do you find that they agree with that position? and are being forced to continuously move forward, or that they think that, hey, my people should be getting these increases and we'll do everything we can to make sure that happens?
Well, the latter is the case. Union officials resoundingly, and this is what I read, they have not told me personally, but resoundingly have told the governor and they've told leadership in Springfield that, you know, we deserve it, you agreed to it, and we're going to continue to push for it.
So then there's going to be this stretch between the monies that are available through property tax and the monies that are being paid out of the fund that's collected from property tax.
I think
something like 60 or 70 cents of every dollar that people write a check to the county goes to the school, their local school district, right?
That's exactly correct.
Right. So that amount may have to go up.
It may. It may have to. But the bigger question is, if it goes up, how many people do you put at risk? How many taxpayers do you put at risk?
Meaning they can't afford to pay their taxes,
Well,
or meaning that
exactly.
they're going to have to sell their house off
Well,
because they can no longer
let's-
afford to pay for it?
Let's back off just a second and let's go back to what the 67% tax increase did to individuals in the state of Illinois. Somewhere between $1,000 or between $1,000 and $1,400 was taken by the state from the individual taxpayer. So now we're going to say to them, okay, that's the first dip and here's the second dip. And that was a double dip, which I don't think people can afford.
You know, back back in the 1970s, there was an alderman in Edwardsville by the name of Arch Merkel. You probably never heard of him, but he was a good old guy, and he worked at, I can't remember, like in Granite City at one of the plants, but you know, he was an alderman. And every time they talked about raising taxes in Edwardsville, he was talking about, well, what about those widows that are on a fixed income that can't afford any more property taxes or other forms of taxes? And you know, he thought he was not just saying this for saying this, he was actually thinking about these people that he knew, the ones who he knocked on doors and talked to. And I'm just wondering if the people that you're talking about actually know these folks who are going to be affected.
Well, I know these folks that are going to be affected. When I was campaigning over the summer and fall, I made it to just about 12,000 doors.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
I know what it's like to go
A lot.
door to door, and 12,000 is a lot.
Well, it's not as many as the previous year, but again, I started in late May and worked right up until the day before election. And the reason I know that this property tax freeze is important is because people that are retired or on a fixed income or who are single, you know, they've lost their spouse, they can't make it and they're selling their homes. And I can give you examples almost by address. And again, I don't, off the top of my head, I can't give you the address, but I can tell you the people and where to go. If anyone is curious about people who are selling their home because they can't afford to live in it. And that's in Madison County.
Mm-hmm. And Madison County is considered usually kind of an upscale place.
There's no doubt about it. Very upscale.
Right. And if the people of Madison County can't make it, then I just wonder about some of the smaller counties in Illinois, the farming communities. Let's talk about that, and maybe, and I know I'm going to hit you kind of about farming, and I'm not sure what you know about that, but how has this recession affected the farming communities here in Illinois?
Well, it's been tough. It's been tough on the farming community. It's been tough on farmers, even though they have insurance, because the formula for buying insurance is complicated, and if you don't buy at max rates, you probably suffer incrementally for the lesser amount of insurance you purchase per acre. But let's talk a minute about what I've seen personally. Talk about the local implement companies in various counties. They're not selling new equipment. John Deere's not selling new equipment. They have a 3 to 4 month inventory sitting on dealers' lots, brand new pieces of equipment that they're holding on until next year. So next year, John Deere is not going to be producing new equipment because they have the 2012 model still sitting there. Mm-hmm. That's not good. We know in the state of Iowa, and I happen to know this personally, that There is a 85-day supply of pickup trucks sitting on GM and Chrysler Corporation dealership lots because the money that farmers used to spend on pickups for business purposes around the farm are not being purchased.
Because they don't have it.
They don't have the money, and they're not going to go out and borrow the money. So those are just two examples of how devastating this drought has been in the Midwest. And I'm sure, like all of us, when you don't have a good cash crop coming in, you start cutting back on a lot of things that you might have done before, like vacations and dinners and movies and so on and so forth. Vacations.
You said the word drought. So this is a direct result of this terrible drought in the summer of 2012?
Part of it is, yeah.
And what about just general economic conditions in the United States? Because I said the word recession, you said drought.
Yeah. I think in the Midwest, and again, I don't see as many farmers as maybe some of my colleagues do further on downstate, but there's an unsettled feeling within the farm community. They don't like the farm bill that sits out there today, and I know that's a federal issue, but I will just tell you they don't like it. They think it's nonsense. They think if there's going to be a real farm bill, it ought to deal with just farmers and farmers alone. And that's a pretty hard argument to disagree with if you are a farmer.
What does it deal with besides farmers?
Well,
because I'm unfamiliar with the farm.
Well, I'm not totally. I can tell you that the farm bill also deals with assistance to food programs, and in the United States, if I'm quoting this correctly, about 85% of that bill deals with helping others, and it doesn't deal with helping farmers. And I'm not saying helping others is not a good thing, but let's bifurcate the two. Let's split them up and call this assistance and call this farm aid.
So now let's just talk about you as, instead of state rep, businessman. Okay. The president was reelected. Many, as you just said, many Democrats were reelected, and new ones were added into elected office. What do you see over the next year or two as economic conditions in Illinois and in the United States? Do you think that there is a formula that's been created which will get us back on what's called the right track?
If there is, I haven't seen it. I'm a pretty regular reader of the Wall Street Journal and some other business magazines, and I also talk to a couple of economists who I rely on to run a business, and they're not real upbeat about the next 4 years. And one of the reasons doesn't have necessarily anything to do with the elections or Republicans and Democrats. What they're looking at is the dire straits that the other countries are throughout the world. And the question really becomes, how long can the U.S. prop up the other failing nations? And the simple truth is the World Bank is fundamentally underwritten by the United States of America. How long can you do that? I don't know. I'm not. That'd be a question for Congressman Davis or Shimkus or Einert, one of the three guys there. They could probably tell you better than I.
Well, we'll see if we can get them in here. I'm actually trying to get some of them to come and visit. We got about a little less than 5 minutes, and at this point I always give my guests the opportunity to talk about things that we haven't covered so far. What is it that you would like to talk about that we haven't talked about?
I think this. I think we need to be very, very careful that those people in leadership in Springfield, and I'm not going to talk nationally, but in Springfield, take their supermajority and do the right thing. My fear is that, they may help some Republican here or some Republican there. They need to be helping the state of Illinois. Look, we have the worst pension underfunding in the United States, the worst.
More than California?
More than California.
Okay.
Our per capita debt is the worst in the nation. It's per capita, it's worse than California. We have a scenario in place where our benefits systems, not only workers' comp, but other benefits systems, are far above what other states do for people that are unemployed or not employable. We just keep rewarding those people who are having difficulties. I'm all for helping those people, but I think if we don't start addressing the things that affect the taxpayer of the state of Illinois to provide security and opportunity, we're making a big mistake. And I think the challenge for the Democrats, A, is to hold their caucus together, because these are tough issues. Hold them together and get them to do the right thing. And that's a big concern for me. I'm hoping the Speaker and President Cullerton can get those things done, because we have a history of knowing our problems and doing nothing about it, and that's my greatest fear.
Speaker Madigan's been Speaker for what, something like 25 years or more now?
Maybe more.
I'm sure he understands the issues that face Illinois. What prevents, I mean, the Democrats and he have been in charge of the Illinois legislature for a long time. What prevents them from, when they see these pension issues you're talking about and the other dilatory effects upon people in the state of Illinois, what prevents them from fixing it?
Money. We have, and I think I've said this on the House floor, there is not a problem in the state of Illinois we could not fix if it were not for money from special interests, and both parties cater to them. Now I'm talking about special interest and money. Those are the driving factors that keep us from putting this state back on track again.
Are you talking about election money, or you're talking about something
well,
else?
No, I'm talking about the money that goes into election funds.
Into campaigns.
Into campaigns to get people reelected. And for 1 minute, and I don't mean to sound like I'm throwing up a red flag, but don't think for 1 minute that anyone in elected office does not understand the obligation that goes with taking huge sums of money from a person. Mm-hmm. So I wish we could get rid of the money. I wish we could get rid of the phony political commercials and mailers and anything else that goes with not telling the truth. I wish we could do that. That's not going to happen. But right now we have 200,000 bills that are unpaid for $7.2 billion. Who's going to address it?
Say that again?
200,000 past due bills for $7.1 billion. And to say, well, it's not $9 billion, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. We have an unfunded pension liability of no less than $89 billion. Someone will suffer if this is not fixed. And by the way, cost shifting is not a very good idea.
A very unflattering picture of the state of Illinois. I'm very sorry to hear some of the things that you've had to say. I hope that the legislature in the coming year or two can figure out what they really want to do. We do appreciate your coming here to visit with us and delivering this news. I say good luck to you over the next 2 years, although we'll see you again in the not too distant future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To my audience, I've been speaking with State Representative Dwight Kay. He represents the 112th district, which is basically Edwardsville, Glen Carbon, Collinsville. Thank you very much for being with us. You can catch this show on YouTube as well. Goodbye.